Hi, everyone. My name is Eddy Vinck. I'm glad to be here today to talk to you about one of my favorite new pieces of technology of the last couple of years, which is Astro, as the title, obviously. My name is Eddy Vinck again. I'm a senior software engineer at a company called FrontValue, which is, you have never heard of it because I'm from the Netherlands, and it's a very small consultancy there, mostly focused around front end, JavaScript, TypeScript, and Node.js, that kind of stuff. Glad to be here to talk to you about Astro today. I wanted to add this quote because, of course, we have a bit of a Lord of the Rings theme. So all we have to do is decide what we do with the time that is given to us. That's a very nice quote from a wise old man named Gandalf. And I think that, we've been here for a few days already, and hopefully you've gotten a lot out of it. You chose to come here to All Things Open and learn a bunch of new things, learn a bunch of, cool stuff about tech like AI and all that stuff, and meet a bunch of cool people as well, make some new connections and, improve your career that way. So I think that is very awesome. And I really thank you for coming to my talk as well and spending your time with me today. Just one quick thing. This talk is not sponsored. I just like Astro. I'm not like affiliated. I will take their money if they want to give it to me, but they haven't been paying me anything. So I'm just a fan. So let's get right into it. What is Astro and what makes it different from some of the other frameworks out there? So as the title of this talk suggests, Astro is a framework for building websites. And it's not just like any other framework that you see in the JavaScript ecosystem, like React or Vue, Svelte, and all the other ones that are mostly geared towards building these web applications. It's more for building these content-focused websites. And Astro is actually very focused on that because Astro knows what it wants to do, and that is being really great at letting you build these content-heavy websites. So a content-heavy website could be, for example, a blog or maybe even e-commerce. But e-commerce is probably where you should draw the line. Anything more complex than that, Astro, you can do it, but it might not be the best choice, but you could still look into it. But that doesn't mean that Astro isn't good. I think that's actually what makes it pretty awesome because of this focus, it allows Astro to provide you a much more streamlined experience to build these types of websites versus, trying to do everything and being mediocre at everything. Being focused is a good thing. It means that, you can have a better result by default as well. So if you're building, if you're thinking about building a website or a web application with Astro, maybe it's not the right choice, but if you're building anything that is very content focused, it could be a great choice for your next project. But that's just what, the Astro team says. You can do whatever you want. Like some people are using Astro instead of Create React App, for example, nowadays to like bootstrap their React applications. You can do whatever you want. I won't judge you. Mostly you'll find that, Astro is for content heavy websites. So I found this open source example online of like a headless Shopify store that was built using Astro. So you can definitely do stuff like that. But mostly you'll find that Astro is being used for these content-focused, like blogs, for example, as you see on the screen here. And these websites don't really require a lot of JavaScript to begin with. And Astro is also a very flexible framework. What do I mean by that? Well, Astro is a bring your own framework kind of framework. It's not very opinionated about like how you build your stuff. For example, you can use Astro with React, with Vue, Svelte, or Solid, or whatever you like to use, or just plain JavaScript as well. It's not tied to any of those specific front-end frameworks. You can pick and choose what you like to build with, and you can take your existing components as well from other projects and bring those into your Astro project to get going faster if you want to reuse something like maybe a pricing component, for example. You can even do more than one framework in the same website. I don't know why you would want to do that, but you can if you want. You can also use a CMS with Astro. Of course, it's content-focused website, so of course you can integrate all these CMSs in a headless way. So you can use Storyblock, Contentful, or even WordPress, which is let's not get into that. Astro projects are fast to build and they're fast to use. And when I started looking into Astro, I really liked how straightforward it was and how easy it looks to work with. And when I actually started using it, I felt, well, okay, that was a good decision. That was pretty validated pretty quickly, because building my own website with Astro was very, very straightforward. I just took an existing Astro template and started building on top of it, customizing the theme a little bit. And I had my website done pretty quickly without even really needing the documentation very much. It was all just by looking at the code and the template, I could figure it out pretty easily. And most of my time was just, working on the CSS, which is honestly what you might want to work on for the most part. So yeah, Astro websites are pretty fast websites, and they actually ship 0 JavaScript by default. But that's not the goal. 0 JavaScript is not the goal. 0 JavaScript is the baseline. What is the goal is providing a good user experience. And Astro and JavaScript can actually help with that. So, of course, there's client-side JavaScript that you can use for a bunch of things, like client-side form validation, common example, or search functionality without having a full page refresh, and a bunch of other cool stuff, but also improving the accessibility of the website, of course, and providing your users with maybe some like real-time data. This is just some random example from MDN, by the way. It's not like Astro. So yeah, one thing that is really cool about Astro is its islands architecture. And what is that? Well, it's a way to divide your website pages up into these things that they call islands, which you could compare to components, basically. And the islands architecture allows you to use JavaScript for only the pieces of your page that need it. And so here in this example, you would maybe have JavaScript for the header because, you want to be able to like do some cool stuff in your navigation, or the image carousel, which, you want to like scroll through. And yeah, those things would require JavaScript, but like the sidebar and the main content, the footer, those are all pretty static. So you don't need any JavaScript for those. But to include JavaScript for those components, you need to, like I said, Astro doesn't ship JavaScript by default. So you need to tell it like, okay, you can ship JavaScript here. And that's what the Astro Islands architecture basically is. So it gives you these kind of client directives that you use in your Astro files. So there's client load, which would, is pretty much like a traditional JavaScript. Like you load it right away because you want these components to be interactive as fast as possible. There's client idle, which is great for components that like they need to be interactive eventually, but maybe not right away. It'll wait until the browser is idle. And a really cool one that I like is client visible, because that will wait until the component is visible to the user. So if you're like have a carousel component that's very low down on the page and you're maybe on a mobile phone, like you're not going to see that unless you scroll all the way down. And if I'm on a website like that and I don't scroll down and I'm like, in another country on like an expensive data plan, then I prefer not to download that whole JavaScript bundle with like a front end framework, maybe even too. So in this example, you would have a client load for maybe the header and a client visible for, well, the image carousel, like I just explained. So yeah, why Astro? Why do people use Astro, and why might you want to use it? So let's first talk about the elephant in the room. Did we really need another JavaScript framework? I don't think so. Maybe, but we've been able to build websites for a long time. But I remember working on my personal website, and this is the first ever iteration. It's in Dutch. You probably can't read it, or maybe you can. I don't know. But this was like written in PHP, and it was like server powered website, but it was not dynamic at all. Like this is all hard coded content, and like it wasn't really ideal. Like I didn't find it like entertaining to update the content as well, because I had to like write it with HTML tags and all that. Not really a great experience. And it was also just not dynamic at all. So really no point. So for my next website, this time it is in English. I thought, okay, let me learn from that experience. I'm going to use like this static site generator that was called, or is called Gatsby.js. And that was pretty cool because I could write blog posts, for example, in Markdown. But the thing about Gatsby was they have this whole GraphQL layer, and I like to customize my stuff a lot. And to do a bunch of customization. You had to hook into that GraphQL layer with like a bunch of like their code, and that got confusing pretty quickly. And in hindsight, maybe it was overkill to have GraphQL for a static, simple content website, but who knows? But that was like my experience. Like I thought after not working with that code for a while, I just completely got lost. Like, okay, I don't know how to work with this. So then that brings me to my current website. And for this one, I did use Astro. And this time it was also a static website. But honestly, compared to my Gatsby website, like the amount of complexity that was required to make this versus that other website was much more reasonable for like what I was trying to achieve. Of course, I was a much better developer at this point. Like this is like 5 years or 2 to 3 years after that previous one. But honestly, like I just got going with Astro, took that template, got going, edited it, and I had a website up in not that much time for learning a new framework. So Astro was pretty straightforward to work with. Another great thing about Astro is the amounts of integrations available, because of course you don't have to do everything yourself. They have a bunch of integrations. There's even a dedicated page on their website where you can find all sorts of integrations that you can easily add for like specific frameworks. Like if you want to use React in your website, or maybe you want to have, maybe you want to host on Netlify, which is their official hosting provider that is sponsoring the project and keeps it free, which is nice. And they have an integration for that you can easily add, and that will like do all the like busy work of like telling Netlify how to deploy the website correctly or run the website correctly when it's deployed there. Or SEO integrations, analytics, and many other things that you will probably need for a website at some point has already been built, and it's pretty easy to add them. So for my own website, for example, I'm using Tailwind CSS for an integration because I like to use Tailwind. I'm using React. I don't prefer to write my sitemaps by hand. So I have a plugin that just generates that based on like all the markdown files that I use for my content, for example. And there's a plugin called MDX, which basically lets me import a React component in my markdown files and like insert that in maybe the middle of a post if you want to have like maybe a calculator component in the middle of your content or something dynamic like that. And adding an integration is pretty easy. You just have the Astro CLI that you can use. So MPX add Astro add React or any other integration. That's it makes all the necessary configuration changes for you. So here I have an example where I added Solid.js to a website, and I ran that command, and it just added that like Solid.js tool to the integrations configuration, and that was basically it. And the great thing about this is that you're not importing like from at Astro / Solid.js. You can just copy and paste your existing components into your Astro project. And like, I'm just importing from Solid.js here, nothing like Astro specific. And I think that's really great that they, were able to configure it this way. And another great thing is themes. Like I already mentioned, I use the theme as well. So they have a whole dedicated section on their website as well for themes, and they have themes for blogs or portfolios, e-commerce websites, like I discussed, documentation websites, because we all have to work on one of those at some point, and many other types of themes are available for a lot of types of projects that you might want to build, which is great. So I kickstarted my own website with a theme called Astro Paper, and you can probably see the resemblance a little bit. And that really helped me speed up my first website without even reading the documentation very much, which is pretty nice. Another awesome thing about Astro is the community, because honestly, it's one of the friendliest communities that I've seen in their Discord that they have, where you can just ask questions if you have them, or showcase your project. Like, I've given this talk a couple times already, and I've shared it there, and people really like seeing that stuff, or oh, I made a new thing on my website, go check it out, here's how I did it. It's pretty cool community. So yeah, let's also take a look at Astro in the wild, because it's not just developers like me doing this on their personal blogs. There's also some pretty big companies already betting on Astro. So you might know them. It's called Firebase, which is like this platform by Google, and they use Astro for their engineering blog. The Guardian, they also have a website about engineering that they built using Astro. Microsoft has a design system called Fluent 2, and their whole documentation website for it is based on Astro, which is pretty cool. So that's another type of website. NordVPN it's not their whole website, but they have like a section about social responsibility that they built using Astro, which is also kind of cool. And Trivago, which is, a hotel search engine. They also have an engineering blog with, it's all based on Astro. And even Limp Bizkit, if you believe it, has a website that was built using Astro, and they also have dark mode. So no excuses. And maybe you would like to use Astro at some point. I think it's worth checking it out. So yeah, how do you actually build with Astro? You can get started by running npm create at Astro at latest in your terminal, and that'll download this installation script, which with a robot that's called Houston, and he will help you set up your project and like ask you a bunch of questions like, do you want to use TypeScript? Do you want us to install the dependencies for you already? And all that, and give you some hints of how to get started. If you're completely new to Astro, it's pretty easy. So yeah, what do you get when you then open up your project? Well, this is an Astro project, and you have a few core directories. So there's a pages directory, which is where you would put your pages. And here you can also have files that will create multiple pages, which is of course great for something like a blog. You have a layouts directory and the components directory, and those are, for layouts and components, pretty straightforward. So yeah, my advice with this would be maybe not to start completely from scratch, but just take one of those themes and get going with it, because honestly, it'll help you get things going pretty quickly. So just go to their website, find something that has like 80% of the stuff that you want, and just, start editing it. That's probably what I would do. So they also let you start a project with the Git, like the Astro CLI, and you can just specify a template. But most templates will also have this in their README. And that also means that creating a template with Astro for other people is also pretty easy, because you don't have to, if you've never deployed anything to NPM, you don't have to do it. You can just give it a GitHub URL, and that it'll use that to, bootstrap a new project. So if you've never created an NPM package and you want to share your custom theme, you can just give it a GitHub URL, and there you go. You have a template, which is pretty cool. And I also briefly mentioned it before, but in the project, you will see these .astro files. So let's take a look at what those look like. So at the top, you have between the dashes, which is called the front matter section. You can import components, for example, or you can even write code. So on the left here, you have a page component, and on the right, you see a card or a page and a card component. And on the right, I have this definition for the props that the component will accept, that for data that can be passed into the card component, for example. So of course, there's also an HTML section, which not much needs to be said about that, except for that you can output those pieces of code or props in your HTML with these curly braces, which is a pretty common thing. But you can also add a style tag in your Astro files. And the cool thing about this is that these styles are actually scoped to the file or the page or the component that it is in. You can expose it with an is::global directive on the style tag, but by default, it will just keep the styles contained to this page. So here I have an super generic H1 styling, but this will not leak to any other pages with another H1 tag. And I think that's pretty cool. And you can also just write JavaScript in those files as well in the script tag if you want to. So you don't have to take something like React, Vue, or whatever if you just want to add some simple interactivity as well. Another really great thing about Astro is type-safe Markdown, made possible by the content collections feature. And this is really great if you want to have like you have this front matter section in your Markdown as well, where you can put the title, for example, and you want some of those fields to be required. So you can define the types of data that the Markdown, for example, would have to have. So here I have the content directory, which is where you can have subdirectories, which map to these defined collections that you see on the left. So here I have an author, a blog, and a topic, and you can even, combine them, of course. And these directories just consist of Markdown files. So here's an example of an author. So I created myself as an author. And if I remove my last name, save the file, try to, compile my website again, I'll just get an error in the terminal. So if you have like a build system, it will just fail the build instead of you getting, a broken page deployed live to the internet. So I think this is a really great experience because it just tells you like, hey, this type of content collection requires this field. So you don't deploy anything that would break. So now comes the scary part of the presentation, at least for me. For you, it's probably fine. But we're going to build a engineering blog live in about, give or take, 5 minutes with a bunch of features. Of course, I'm going to follow my own advice. So I have a theme that I prepared for this talk that is geared towards these blogs that I want to deploy. It's called Astro Engineering Blog, and it's findable on the theme section as well. If you search for engineering blog, I know, a very creative name. And it's a pretty awesome theme, but don't just take my word for it. In the Astro Discord, one of the maintainers also said that it was awesome. So Astro maintainer approved. There you go. So yeah, let's get into the demo. I made a note for myself that I need to mirror my screen for this part. So bear with me while I do that. All right, just a sec. All right, here we go. So I'm gonna start by going to astro.build, that's our website. And I'm gonna go to the resources section and then the themes, and I'm gonna search for engineering. And then I find my theme, and I'm just gonna click on get started, and that will take me to the GitHub page. And here I have this getting started command, of course, which is what we talked about earlier. You can just paste this into your terminal, and that will download the Astro installation script. So Houston's gonna help me set up my project here. So I'm gonna call this ATO demo live. Hope that I didn't use that name yet when preparing. So this is gonna just install all my dependencies for me, and well, this is live, so hopefully the internet doesn't fail me here. Guess we'll find out. Okay, pretty good so far. So now Houston gives me these handy tips of how to start my project. So I'm just gonna copy these, but first I'm gonna open this up in my code editor. All right, now I can just npm run dev, and now I have a URL where I can preview the website. So if I look at the latest posts, there's actually the README included for convenience. And here I get actually some tips on how to customize my website, because not every website for engineering blogs has to look the same. So there's a source/consts file that I can just change. So I'm gonna change the brand to all things open. And here I'm just gonna abbreviate it because otherwise it would be too long for this section. So now the text is of course updated, and you can see it in like the footer, like with the copyright and all that. That's pretty basic. We can do a little bit better. So there's also the styling that we can completely customize. So like, again, I said that I like Tailwind. So there is a Tailwind configuration where we can easily customize like all the top level colors for the website. So I don't want you to look at me picking from a color wheel for like 10 minutes. So I prepared these colors in advance. So I'm just gonna copy and paste these in here. And now you'll see that the website is kind of all things open styled. So we have the blue and the red links and the button, right? But I also want to change this image, so that's also pretty easy to do. If you look at the public directory, that's where you'll find like the default social image. So this is also what you see when you share the website online. So I also don't want you to watch me playing around in Figma for 10 minutes. So I prepared an image for this too. So now we have a pretty, customized website with some simple changes, just changing the colors, the names, and adding an image. And, we have a pretty on-brand website now for an engineering blog. So what I'm going to do now is stop this and commit my changes, customize theme, and I'm going to go to GitHub, create new repository. All right, all things open, 24 live, and I'm gonna make it private for now, create, and I'm gonna just paste this command from GitHub, and while that's going, I'm gonna go to Netlify actually, which is their official hosting partner, and also what I set up the website for. So I'm gonna just start a new website with the GitHub integration, which is how I can easily deploy the website. Here we go. So I'm gonna pick the project that I just created, and because Astro has this integration with Netlify, they already have all these things pre-filled, so you don't have to even configure it at all. You can just deploy. And while that is going, I'm gonna start up the dev server again and quickly just go through the project that we just created. So, of course, on the homepage, you have the latest posts, but there's also a dedicated blog page with some pagination, so you can go back and forward, of course. There's authors. So this is an engineering blog for multiple authors if you want to have that. So these are the authors on the blog by default. And you can see that they've also both worked on the first post. So if you click on that and scroll down, you can actually see that co-authoring is also supported, which is something that I wanted to have. There are topics, so you can see which topics are on the website. And there's a bunch of them, and also uncategorized for when you don't add one. There's a simple about page, and this is one of the great things about Astro is it's super simple. It's just a markdown file with a specified layout in the front matter section, and that's it. That's how you can create pages if you want to. It doesn't have to be like an Astro file. It can just be a markdown file, and I think that's pretty cool. So what else? We have a search feature. So this is just a search bar. I can use this to search for all the posts, of course. I also added that MDX feature, so I want to quickly showcase that I can just take that search bar and add that in the middle of my blog post if I want to, and just it'll just work. I think that's really cool. And there is light and dark mode, of course. Okay, I think, yep, we now have a live URL for the website. So if you go to this made up URL, that's just, you can change it, of course. You would see this website that we just started less than 10 minutes ago, and we customized it. I explained it, and now it's live on the internet. So I think that's pretty cool. So you can build websites pretty quickly with Astro. So now I'm just gonna mirror my display again, or stop mirroring, I mean. There we go. All right. Oh yeah, this is the backup video in case it went wrong. So yeah, give or take 5 minutes, we built a website from scratch with an existing theme, of course, but that's what I would recommend you do. And we deployed it to the internet, fully customized as well. So I think that's pretty cool. Not too bad for about 5 minutes of work. So what else? What else haven't we talked about Astro yet? Because there's a lot of other cool stuff as well. One thing I would like to cover is how do you actually combine those Astro features with the UI library components and the content collections. So you don't import the content collection stuff in your, for example, solid.js files, you can just create an Astro file and then import your solid component into the Astro component. And in that Astro component, don't forget to add the client load. Otherwise, nothing will work. It's just going to be a static input. But then you can just use the get collection method to get all your blog posts, and you can just pass that as a prop to the component. And then you're like in solid.js or React.js or Vue.js land, and it's just data that you work with. It's like super simple. I think it's pretty cool. But how does that work without a full-blown server? Because we just deployed a static website. Well, by default, you can, of course, make it work with a server endpoint. But by default, it will just take that data and like inline it as JSON in these web components called Astro Islands. And that's how it like combines those two pieces together. But Astro is not just for static websites. You can do server-side rendering and even combine them for hybrid rendering, which is pretty cool. And to find out how to do that, you can go to their docs, but it basically comes down to changing the output mode in your configuration from static to server, for example. And this is the whole configuration for that website, by the way. It's super simple with all the integrations. So if you're using hybrid mode, you can also specify which pages should be server-side rendered or not. So if you export this variable called pre-render and make it false, it will not pre-render the page, and thus it will be server rendered every time you get a request. But otherwise, it would be static, for example, if you made it true. Another thing that I would like to cover, since I've worked with like Astro for a couple of my personal projects already, and I also have this theme, is how it's like the updating story. Because in my experience with some other frameworks, updating has been a bit more tough than with Astro. So Astro actually has this utility CLI that will help you upgrade, and it'll just show you like what package versions will be upgraded, and even give you a change log for some things that need to be changed. And I think that is pretty easy. And you can just do that. I like recently, when I gave this talk a month ago or so, I just updated all my dependencies for the theme and just tried to run it, and everything worked. And that's awesome. Like I've never seen anything like that with most other frameworks, at least in the JavaScript ecosystem. So yeah, I also briefly mentioned it, but you can do server endpoints. Astro allows you to create these endpoints that you can just return JSON from, or even like any other types of data. So you could programmatically create an image or an RSS feed or anything like that. And you can just accept the get or post requests, of course. So the first option is to create a static file endpoint, and that is just turned into a static file at build time if you want. But if you want it to be dynamic, it works the exact same way. You can just export pre-render equals false, and it'll be dynamic and run every time you make a request. And what does it look like? It's pretty similar to how, API routes or how other frameworks do it. So you can just export from a file in your pages router a get verb or a post verb, and that's how you would return responses to those types of requests. And they also have an all verb for like, fallback if you don't want to write every single other one, which is pretty convenient. And this feature, I've personally used it to create these, for example, this feature where you kind of have like these emoji reaction buttons for blog posts, for example. So that's like nice to add some little bits of interactivity to a website as well. And also some blog post ranking page. So you can do like some dynamic stuff with Astro too. And this is all done with a backend as a service framework, which is, by the way, completely optional in the template. So that's also something that's pretty interesting, because you can make it very flexible to like what types of features to enable based on like some configuration. So by default, like the thing that we just deployed, it doesn't have this, but if I were to add some extra configuration from a backend as a service platform and like hookups and endpoints, then it will work. Another really nice just thing for like the user experience are these view transitions. So I don't know if it's clearly visible on the screen, but you can kind of see it fade in and out. This one's more obvious, of course, but this is just for demo purposes. I didn't have this in the theme, but like, it goes back and forth between the pages. So those are kind of cool things to have in your website for just a little bit nicer user experience. And how do you add those? You can just have this view transitions component in the website or in your head tag, and you can specify these transition name and transition animate properties, and then it'll just animate between pages. And I think that's pretty nice. So how are we looking at the time? Pretty good, I think. Yeah. Should you use Astro? I mean, I'm giving this talk about it, so I think yes, but only if you're doing like a very content-heavy website. I think it's a great use case for Astro. If you're doing something more dynamic, then you could still try it. Maybe they're doing some cool stuff to like make it better for those types of use cases. But if you're building anything that's very content-focused, I think it's worth giving it a try. So yeah, you can just go to astro.build, get started, maybe check out this engineering blog that I made. And one last thing that I would like to cover, because if you have an engineering blog, then you probably also want some content. In my experience, writing a blog post takes me, it feels like it takes forever. So I'm also much better at yapping than writing, as you can probably tell. So I made this thing where I can just talk and it'll like create a blog post for me from like what I say, and I can edit it within the same app. And like all I have to do is a bit of editing, and then I have something that I can publish. And I just built this in my spare time. So yeah, I think it's pretty great, but don't just take my word for it. There are a few pretty professional writers already using it. It's a few months old now. And yeah, you can export to Markdown, for example, for an Astro blog if you would like to try it. And soon I'm releasing a pretty cool feature where you can actually train it based on your existing blog posts, so that it'll produce blog posts that read more like how you would write them right off the get-go. And you can just make some very small edits, and then it's, you have a blog post. Anyway, that's the plug. There's a discount code if you want. And yeah, I have a QR code for all the slides and resources and all of that if you want to check that out. And also on the right, there's the link to Blog Recorder and the discount code if you want it. It's free to try. So yeah, let me know if you like it. So yeah, that's my talk. Thank you so much for coming.